love riding my bike. I love running. I don't care what they think about it. I love it.
At that point, when I knew I was going to win, chills just went up and down my entire body.
I don't believe there are any good or bad foods. Food is food.
I still feel so passionate about getting that record that I'm like, I'm just going to do it.
As an athlete, I was like, what's my story, or what's your story? What can you learn from it? And what can you teach people?
Welcome to the IronWomen podcast. I'm Haley Chura, and I'm joined by Alyssa Godesky. Alyssa, it was a huge weekend of racing this past weekend and a lot of race coverage. And I found myself actually intending to get out on a bike ride because it was actually really beautiful here in Bozeman. But I instead sitting with multiple screens going, multiple commentaries, also like texting people. And it felt like a little bit of like mission control in my house, and didn't get my ride started until probably like noon because I just got sucked in. I couldn't stop. It was so good.
I know the answer to that, Haley, is to just be injured and have nothing else like hanging over your head except having to watch the coverage. So that has worked out for me very nicely. The most frustrating thing about it is though, we use a Chromecast to like get from computers or phones to like our TV or whatever. And sometimes outside watch and the whatever like streaming the other races might be on doesn't like play nicely, and so then I'm watching one on my phone, I'm watching one on my computer, and then I have like the blank TV that I wish it was like all broadcasting on, so I mean, first world problems, and we are working on our technology situation over here, but it is exciting. I mean, it's just like it's a lot of races. Sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, this race is stacked, like this race is stacked, like these pros are just coming out of the woodwork, and it's a lot of racing to be had these days.
It was. Well, let's start with T100 San Francisco. What did you think of that race?
I think my favorite part of the race was watching Imogen Simmons come out of the water, and then the commentators are like, so if you watch the race, you could see there was a really strong current, and the way, like, I guess the swim was like angled at the beach, I think we're all kind of programmed to like swim to that exit arch, right? But like after watching the men's race, which went off about 45 minutes earlier, you could see that like it was actually faster to like kind of let the current, I guess, kind of take you into this corner of the beach that was there first, and then just like sprint along the beach to the arch. And so Imogen Simmons, I think, was the only female pro who did that. And she ended up getting like a clear, good, solid lead from that, which I thought was really fun. Like, I love to see little things like that where it's like, man, like these little things make a difference. And like, she probably, whether she knew or not that she was alone kind of going that way, it's like, it's fun to see those kind of tactical moves play out, especially that early, right, in the race. So I did kind of get a kick out of that. What did you think?
Do you think that was luck, or do you think that was knowledge?
I don't know. The commentators were like, she's a very smart woman. They're like, I forget, like an engineer or something. So she probably like knew. I was like, odds of her really figuring that out. Like, my guess is she probably kind of got pushed to that and then was like, screw it, this is going to work out fine. Right. And like went, but maybe we'll have to have her on and ask her if it was a calculated move or not.
I think it was luck. I think it was luck is from watching it. That swim was so different than I had expected. I think historically Alcatraz is a long swim. I think it takes longer. And I read some of the post-race recaps, and it did seem like the boat was a little bit closer to shore than normal. I don't think they wanted a 3-kilometer swim. They were trying for a 2-kilometer swim, but when the men came out in only 14 minutes, which, a normal time is probably like 25 minutes. And so I think that started raising some eyebrows that maybe the course was not quite what they expected. And then I think for the women, it sounded like they were trying to put the boat a little bit further out, and it still ended up with like 16 minutes, Imogen was. But it was cool watching her catch that current and, kind of crazily past the whole field. I'm sure it felt fun as well, but they were also in booties and neoprene gloves, like mandated
gloves and booties and thermal head things, right? Like, which is crazy. I definitely I don't think we've ever seen mandated booties, gloves, and thermal.
No, I think it was low 50s.
Okay.
And I do know that these T100 races are very much governed by World Triathlon rules. So, which they have certain calculations for water temperature and air temperature and what is required in those situations. And so I'm assuming that was a World Triathlon rule. So that's not something you would necessarily see in Ironman racing. But I just imagine, I have never swum in booties or gloves. And I also just imagine like, if I was swimming in booties or gloves, I probably would love to have a current and get out as quick as possible because your feel of the water would be so different.
Yeah, I mean, I swam in those at One Water, and
oh yeah, that's right.
It like the gloves. I thought the gloves was actually fine. It definitely keeps your hands a lot warmer, but I was also swimming with paddles. I would have like really not been a pleased swimmer if I didn't have the paddle to kind of give you like a little bit of push. Because the glove does, even though it's like quite form fitting, it feels soggy and like heavy. It's definitely not, it doesn't aid, it doesn't make for a fast swim time. So yeah, I think that was probably a fair thing to just make the swim what it was, I guess. Haley, did you enjoy the Taylor Nib show that happened after the swim?
That was impressive, Alyssa. Watching her just make quick progress to the front of the race and just keep building that gap. And I have raced a lot of those women recently, and I know how strong they are on the bike. And then to watch Taylor just make it look easy.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it is easy, but I think Taylor is just that strong. And it is very exciting that she has qualified for the US Olympic team in both the time trial on the bike and in triathlon. She obviously is incredibly strong on the bike. I listened to her post-race recap, and it sounds like she was still learning things about bike handling and even on a course like that. So it's super exciting to watch her race. I feel like it's a lot of fun, but I'm also just in awe, and I'm like, okay, I got to get myself going, because I'm like, if that's what's possible, I can be a certain percentage of that, right?
Totally. Yeah. I was just like watching her go, being like, USA, right? Like it got me so pumped up to see that she's in good form. Like they interviewed her dad at one point, and then they interviewed her afterwards, right? I feel like everyone's in like pretty good spirits. It seems like their heads in the game, right? Which is good to see. And you know, you gotta love having a good kind of horse in the game, so to speak, for the Olympics. I'm excited for that.
I am excited. And so rounding out that podium, there was Kat Matthews and then Laura Phillip. So, and then Imogen, who we mentioned earlier, led the swim, finished fourth. Really, really good racing. I mean, I think these T100 races are just shaping out to be so exciting, because we've seen a different winner at each race so far, you know, and that's so wild. And I think that that's like really, really exciting. And these courses are really extreme. And so they bring out different things in different people. And obviously some people are focused on the series, and some people are like Taylor, are racing a bunch of different races, but still able to really excel at the series. And I thought the coverage was pretty good. It was a little different with this one, having the men's race going on at the same time, which I do understand was part of location and the fact that the PTO doesn't own that race, but still made it happen, and very, very cool. So congratulations to everyone who raced there. Thank you for the entertainment. But at the same time, we had Boulder 70.3, part of the Ironman Pro Series, going on. And it was like literally at the same time, because I wouldn't sometimes like have both commentaries, and I can't handle that. My brain can't handle that. So that I'd like mute one, and I'd be like, okay, the men are on the screen, I'll mute this one. And then listen to the one where the women are on the screen.
Oh, that's a good strategy. I like that strategy. I ended up, honestly, I didn't get to watch too much of Boulder till probably the very end. So I did see Ellie Salthouse cross the line, but I didn't get to see too much of the play-by-play action there, I have to admit.
I mean, Sif Madsen, who I have raced with and is a tremendous cyclist, like put on a show there from the bike, and ultimately did what Ellie did pass her, but I think Sif has had some injuries, and so it's great to see her back. Valerie Barthelemy was third, who is an athlete who I think was trying to make an Olympic bid this year on the Belgian team and did not make it. I believe Valerie was 10th at the Olympics in Tokyo, and so wasted no time after not making that Olympic team, got on the start line in Boulder. And so I think that that's kind of exciting. I expect we're going to see several people like that who maybe are moving into non-drafting races and some slightly longer races, even before the Olympics and then certainly after the Olympics. And then the other name that really stood out to me was Erica Ackerland, who is our past feisty intern here at the IronWomen podcast. Erica is an American athlete who also, did not quite make the U.S. Olympic team this year, but decided to race Boulder as her 70.3 debut, had a really fantastic race, finished 5th. And I am excited to see what she can do. And I don't think she's totally done with draft legal, but I am excited to see what she can do in the non-drafting world as well.
And with Haley, all this talk of the Olympics, we would be remiss to not also point out that the Olympic selection happened and the US has their team, which we already know has Taylor Knibb auto-qualified, last fall, I guess, right? So we've known that Taylor was heading to Paris. She will be joined by Taylor Spivey and Kristen Kasper. So both of these ladies, I think, Taylor has has a great kind of, what's the word? Like, not Cinderella story. I don't know. What's the word for almost miss, right? A couple times.
Taylor Spivey? You're talking about Taylor Spivey?
Yeah. Did I say Taylor Knibb? It is
no,
you
said confusing. Taylor, and now I'm like, my brain goes
Taylor
to Taylor Swift.
Too many Taylors here in 2024.
A Cinderella story for sure. Okay, yeah. So Taylor Spivey again. So this is the U.S. Olympic team. I know that the If We Were Riding podcast has covered this in depth, and obviously Sarah True has a lot of personal experience with the U.S. Olympic team, and then also being, on the selection committee. So our people who listen to both podcasts are probably very familiar with the situation. But in the Tokyo Olympics, it did come down to a discretionary pick for the third athlete, and they did choose Katie Zafiris over Taylor Spivey. And then kudos to Taylor Spivey for, sticking with it for another 4 years, and then coming down to another discretionary pick, this time for 2 athletes, and them picking Taylor Spivey and Kristen Kasper. And I know that the selections, because of that race being canceled in Abu Dhabi earlier this year, they really only had Yokohama and Cagliari, those 2 races to judge the performances. And that's
hard.
I don't envy the people on that selection committee, because that is very, very hard.
Yeah, no, it's tough, but I'm super pumped about this squad of women. I think that it's just going to make for a really exciting summer. I think the countdown is on now to Paris. It's going to be good.
Very good. And it'll be interesting to see who's on the relays. And I think there are still a few other Olympic teams that have not been named. Another name that I think stood out to me was Manami Ejima Martin for Guam. So we had her on the podcast a year or 2 ago, I believe. And she talked about this kind of uphill battle she had of even trying to figure out how to qualify for the Olympics for Guam, because she will be the first athlete to represent Guam in triathlon in the Olympics, and she has qualified. And so we're super psyched for Manami for both just creating a path, for qualifying for the Olympics, but also creating this path. And I think that that's very exciting and admirable, and I will be cheering for her. And I'm really excited to watch that race in Paris. Alyssa, one other thing when we look at the people who did not make it, we have Katie Zafiris, Gwen Jorgensen on the American side. Do we think that they're going to be coming over to non-drafting races? Do you expect that to happen?
If I had to place a bet, I would say yes, right? Because they're super fit, they're gonna do well, right? And so, it is a clear, good avenue if I was them, I think, but I'm not them. I'm not even close to being them. So I'm excited to see what they do. Both of them have had really long, solid careers too, and are into other chapters of their lives. So I don't know, maybe they have other projects going, maybe, they have other things in mind, but I'm excited to see what they do. But I would love to see them give it the old go, right? And see what happens this season, but we'll have to wait and see, I guess.
I know it'll be interesting when we hear these wild card announcements for T100 London. That's where,
Yeah.
I mean, Katie Zafiris has shown she raced the Collins Cup in 2021, no,
Mhm.
2022. I'm like trying to remember which year I was there. I think it was 2022, and did great. I mean,
Mhm.
really did great at the distance and at non-drafting racing. And I don't think we've ever seen Gwen in a non-drafting race, but might be interesting. We've never seen Taylor Spivey either, and she is one of the hotshot athletes who will be coming to that series after the Olympics. So it's interesting, very interesting. I think exciting, lots of exciting opportunities in the sport right now, and so it'll be fun to see what happens. But congrats to everyone who did go through that whole Olympic selection process, including the people who had to make the selections for those discretionary
Seriously,
picks.
I did not envy that at all.
Hard thing, but so much exciting racing to look forward to in the coming months. But Alyssa, you have some exciting things to look forward to in the coming weeks. Tell us what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, Haley, isn't it on every person's bucket list to drive an RV across the country at the right bold speed of 20 miles an hour? So that is what
It's just to enjoy the view.
I know. So over the past year, really, I have been kind of working on this like project with one of the athletes I coach, and then 3 athletes that Hillary coaches with Biscay Coaching. So we have a squad of 4 athletes, mixed co-ed 4-person team racing RAM this year, Race Across America. So it's been super exciting to be, having this all come to fruition finally. And Haley, I'm the crew chief, which, I mean, I don't want to brag, but is like a pretty stressful job. Being honest, there's a lot. So RAM has, I mean, as you can imagine, it's like there's a lot of rules, and they take it seriously. They take it seriously for safety, right? Which is like they need to take it seriously, but there's a lot of rules. The rule book itself is like 65 pages or something. And like it's a lot of rules. And so anyway, I am, with everything that's been going on with my knee, I'm obviously not the most nimble of crew members, but it worked out that one of the holes, like as I was kind of putting the crew into the places, was the RV driver. And I was like, boom, I can drive an RV. And so that's going to be my main job here as I fly out tomorrow, actually. And we have about 4 days of prep in Oceanside, California. And we start Saturday, June 15th. Our start time is 12:08 p.m. And they start riding east. And so we're hoping to finish in about a week in Atlantic City this year. So the finish is in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And I think at the time that the podcast comes out next week, Haley, I'll be somewhere in the middle of Indiana going into Ohio next Thursday. So everyone can kind of send some speedy thoughts to us there, but this has been like a really fun, I mean, I've done multi-day things and stuff like that, but for a full week, that's kind of next level. And then this 4-person team, right? Like figuring out the most effective, efficient way to be getting these 4 people on bikes across the country is really interesting. So it's been a fun little distraction. I'm very ready to have a change of scenery and kind of get somewhere else with my own self. So I'm really looking forward to this project and seeing a lot of America along the way.
Yeah. How is your knee feeling? I mean, when we last talked 2 weeks ago, I know that you were 8 days away from your doctor's appointment on, a bending evaluation. Is that a technical term? What happened with that?
So now I'm like 8 days past, right? I had the x-ray actually. So it was a bone evaluation, I guess we could say.
Okay. I thought.
And so we wanted to see if there was good bone growth where they did the osteotomy. They like put this plastic wedge in there with some bone marrow type of substances. And like the hope is that your body is like stimulated and starts growing actual bone, right? To like fuse all of that together. And so it's funny, like I got the x-ray and I was like, I got the original x-ray and I was like the one from right after the post-op. And then I looked at that one. I was like, these look exactly the same, but apparently it looks good, better than my naked eye could see. Cause the doctor said it looks great. He said things are looking good as we would want them to look at like 6 and 7 weeks post-op. So I have started weight bearing. It's a slow road, you know, it's like one of those things where there's no good way to know how much weight bearing is like too, right? It's more of an art than a science, I guess, this part of things. And so feeling out how much work the leg can do without losing the bending, right? And things like that is, it's tough. It's definitely tough. It's like, I'm excited to have, a break out of the house and my normal routine. You know, I'll have to stay on top of the PT exercises and stuff, but I think I've just been getting a little bit in my own head too about all of it and what is to come and all of that. So I'm just, you know, everything's on track. Everything's looking good for healing and stuff, but it's just slow going. I think in a couple weeks, you know, my goal is to just not be on crutches still. So but there's not a lot of build on top of that yet.
I am very curious if there will be some like social media updates on your RAM team with you doing like PT outside the RV. Is there someone else who's going to drive? Because I understand these go like all night, right?
Oh yeah. So my co-driver is Jerry Link, coach. We call him coach because he was the high school cross country coach of my athlete Brian, and Brian's like how old is Brian? Mid 40s, right? So Coach Jerry is, I want to say he's 80 years old, and Coach Jerry and I are driving this sucker across the country together, and he's a little bit more nervous about it than I am, but so I do think I've tried to say I can take the bulk of the driving, but I will need a rest, because you're right, it's like 24/7 kind of leapfrog situation. So we're not stopping till Atlantic City.
And I know that there's like a lot of people doing RAM this year, but people we know. I know that past guests that we've had on this show, Danny Grable and Katie Aguilar, are on a team that I believe is going for a record.
Mhm.
And then Dee Griesbauer, who's also been on the show a couple times, is doing RAM. So do you like scope out the competition? Is this a race that we need to be like really following?
It is definitely a race. I think it's like one of those things that the teams though are racing with blinders on, you know, for the most part. I think, you know, our team also wants to race as fast as they can, but I think it's like a friendly, everyone's in it together type of race too. So I'm definitely hoping we get to cross paths with Danny and with Dee out there, but there's so much going on, like literally so many moving parts to these teams to just keep them going, that, you know, we're not going to have a lot of time to socialize, meet the other crews, whatever. Like, you got to keep this train moving. So unless we want to be out there for like a lot longer than we've budgeted time for, which would be a problem.
But you do follow the same route. Everyone follows the same route.
Yep. Everyone's on the same route. It's interesting. Like, you get the GPX route, but actually you get like paper route book, like a binder. And so that is your turn by turn directions. It's like going back to MapQuest life, right? Like, luckily I lived in a time when we had that, because it's basically what it is. And so then if you're in a car that's kind of following one of the riders, you actually, you know, we have this, I think most teams do, you have a headset and you're communicating with the rider to make sure that they're aware, because sometimes the GPX is wrong. Like, you know how sometimes you load GPS into your bike computer and it kind of directs you like to the shortest route or the most efficient, right? Like, as much as you try to account for that and like hope that the guy who made this big GPX route took every little turn exactly as it's supposed to be, you're going to hear in your headphones from the navigator behind you in the car, like, okay, you know, Haley, you have a turn coming up in a quarter mile, right turn, you know, that kind of thing. And so there's a lot going on, but everyone is on the same route. And I think, you know, from solos to 8-person teams, there's a lot of different strategies out there. Our team is doing like 20 to 30 minute pulls. And so, you're rotating the riders every 20 to 30 minutes, and then they're in pairs, and they take shifts of 4 to 6 hours. And then the next pair comes on and they do pulls of 20 to 30 minutes kind of thing. So it's really hard riding in that time, right? To try and get like the most speed possible. But it'll be interesting to see. Cause I know when I talked to Dee a few months ago too about their strategy, she was like, because it's pretty like, you know, by the book of it, people say the shorter pulls is better, but Dee like, I don't know, I want to do like a 6-hour pull. So I'm curious to see if she has convinced her team to let her do a 6-hour pull just every day and just knock her workout like that.
That sounds like Dee Dee. Interesting. Well, I'm excited to hear about it when you get back, how it all goes. I am looking forward to your team. I know that you can track these. I mean, and when you say like nice map quest, I'm thinking, well, Alyssa, this is no big deal. Like she's done Barkley with like a stick figure map and a compass. So this is like you're made for this thing.
True. No, it is. I mean, I think they give you all the tools, but you definitely have to do the training. You know, we have a crew of 10 people and 4 riders that also need to be up to speed on all of that, right? So it's a lot of work and prep and time and energy that goes into it. So I'm really excited that now it's almost time to kind of celebrate all that work. Yeah.
10-person crew. So hopefully at least one of those is a chef. I imagine there's also a lot of food going on.
Yeah, I think actually chef duties a lot of times are going to fall on the RV, Coach Jerry and I. So we plan a lot of rice bowls, white rice bowls with some salt.
Perfect.
I think I can handle that. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's going to be very, very fun. But speaking of Barkley, I feel like we have a Barkley themed episode that's very exciting today.
We do. Haley, this is super exciting. So this week I talked to Jasmin Paris, who is a woman I feel like needs no introduction after the year she's had, where she became the first woman to finish the Barkley Marathon. I first met Jasmin actually 2 nights before the Barkley Marathon in 2022. So we were both virgins at the event that year. And part of when you arrive at Barkley into Frozen Head campground, state park campground, it's like there's the one area where the race is kind of held. And so it's like a scary thing when you go in as a new person to the race, because you don't want to take a veteran's spot. Like you want to stay out of everyone's way. You know that you're not really supposed to take like a campsite that's really close to the start or anything like that. So I had found a nice campsite that was like close enough. It was kind of within sight of like what's going on. You could keep a pulse on things, but it was pretty far back. But it was huge. It was like giant, right? Like you could fit 3 or 4 kind of groups in there. So I was like, oh man, I'm gonna have to like find some friends. I hope people want to like be friends with me, right? And then sure enough, two other racers roll in. One was a UK athlete named Carol, and then the other was Jasmin and her husband Conrad, and they set up their things there. And so it was funny. I feel like that was also the first moment I realized what a badass Jasmin was, because I was there with like this giant tent. I like blew up a queen size mattress in there to have like a nice sleep, right? Jasmin, I like poked my head out. She was in like this tiny ultralight like tent with like it was like a mesh, right? Like she was basically just like sleeping under like a mesh little hanger on a regular, basically on the ground. And then her husband Conrad was like sleeping in the car just to like let her have that little area. And I was like, oh man, either she's doing it right or I'm doing it right. And it turns out she was doing it right. And so that year she finished 3 loops of the fun run. In the years since, she finished the 4th loop at overtime. And then we were all waiting for her to do, the big thing. And in one of the most dramatic finishes, I feel like in sporting history, she nailed it. So it was really exciting. There are tons of interviews out there with Jasmin since this historic event. And I highly encourage people to go listen to those. I purposefully asked like very different questions because I was talking to her a couple months after her finish. And so I didn't really want to double up on that. But, if you haven't listened to some of those other interviews that she's given, definitely go and catch her play-by-play on those as well. But we'll hear from Jasmin up next after a word from our sponsors. Hi, Jasmin. Welcome back to the IronWomen podcast.
Hello. Thanks for having me on again.
So, Jasmin, it's been 2 months since your iconic finish at the Barkley Marathons, becoming the first woman to finish 5 loops there. It's been 2 months. I imagine life has been moving at like fast forward speed since then. You're a veterinarian, you have a family, all of the things that you're balancing, plus recovery from this, right? Have you had any moments, like had time to have moments of, wow, like, did this really happen? This really has happened, right? Like, are there moments when it really hits you and you get to just kind of soak it all in that you did this?
Yeah, I think the moments when that happens most is when I'm cycling a cycle commute to the lab from nursery when I'm on my research weeks. and those commutes on the bike, that's when I sometimes get to think about it, and I cycle. I'm still cycling along with a big grin on my face. That was, yeah, definitely when we got back that first week. That was where when it first genuinely sunk in. When I got a bit of a moment to think about it. Yeah, it was fantastic.
Oh, well, Haley and I definitely spent the weeks afterwards also just kind of soaking it in. And I think it still, pops into my mind, and I'm smiling thinking about the fact that you did it. So it was really a special moment this past spring. So I wanted to jump into some questions, and you've done a ton of interviews in these last few months. And so I encourage people to soak all those up, go find those, listen, read everything they can, because you've provided some really good insight and answers into that. And I'm trying not to double up on those questions. So we'll see if I have a few new ones for you today. And I wanted to start because Laz has talked about, the finishers of Barkley and what he believes finishing requires. And he has said before that he thinks it requires an obsession with Barkley, that someone goes fully all in. And so obviously you were carrying intrinsic motivation necessary for the job. You've talked about the training sessions you've done overnight, time after time in terrible weather. Would you call that an obsession? And do you think that's a necessary trait to finish the Barkley?
I guess I think to some extent, yes, that you need to have an obsession like that. I think that personally, I'm one of those people that if I set my mind to something and want to do it, I give it everything. I go full throttle at it. So for me, I guess whenever I'm sort of excited to do something and really set my mind to something, it sort of becomes an obsession. And I think just the fact that I went back 3 times, knowing what to expect and knowing what I was going to put myself through and knowing what it was going to cost me to do 5 loops, I think I'd have to say that there had to be some obsession to want, to be able to go back there and kind of go through all that again. So yeah, I think you're probably right. But then as I say, I think to some extent that's just my personality, that if I want to do something, I go at it with everything I've got.
Did you ever stop to think about what would happen if, the next 5 years of weather had been so terrible, there was never a chance anyone could finish Barkley, right? I imagine you had to kind of reconcile that thought and that potential with yourself. So had you had thoughts about where you would draw the line in keeping that obsession going? Gary Robbins has been really vocal about his journey with it and kind of giving that up. So what was that thought process like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. You're completely right that I had thought that for a number of reasons. The fact that, you basically spend the whole winter training, you have to kind of give up lots of free time that you might have had to spend doing other things. It's a big commitment for me going away from the children for that long. So I've left the children each time for about 10 days with my parents. So that's kind of a big commitment. But also flying to the States. So I'm trying to not fly so much because, I'm really aware of the climate change and the kind of emergency that we're facing, and I'm trying to not fly to races. So traveling to the States every year for 3 years in a row for me was actually a massive dilemma. So I wasn't sure personally how much I could keep going with Barkley, and that was, in some ways, that was another part of the motivation, of that intrinsic motivation to get it done this year. A lot of me went to that race saying this year that I was going to do it, this was going to be the year, and the one thing that I couldn't control was the weather. And then when the weather forecast was good, I was like, it's on, this attempt is on, I feel good, I've put in the training, but mostly I really want it has to happen this year. And one of the reasons was I could see that I wasn't going to be able to keep doing it forever, and I wouldn't have kept going back every year for all the reasons I've just mentioned. So I knew that at some point I was going to face the big dilemma, whether it was next year or the year after, of basically saying I can't keep doing this. And so when the weather was good this year, I had no excuse. I had to get it done. And that was one of the things that was going through my head in those final seconds of racing for the finish line, was it has to be this year. You've come this close, and you've got to finish it off.
I think I read too that after you finished, camp was packed up, people were driving out, and I think a downpour started in the hours after that or something. And so I have to believe there's a lot of forces in the universe kind of holding out that weather for you, that wanted you to get to that gate in time. So, just another one of those kind of goosebumps moments where you wonder what else is kind of aligned to make things happen.
Yeah.
Jasmine, in other interviews, you've talked about how these last few years you had struggled with just some low grade fatigue and like kind of going into events, not quite feeling 100%, not feeling like yourself. How has recovery been, I guess, this year compared to years when you've done, 3 loops and stuff like that? Like, do you feel like it is noticeably more fatigue? And then also along with that, are you doing anything different this year with recovery to ensure that you don't kind of backslide to that place? Because I think you said going into this year, you actually felt like the weight had been lifted and you were like yourself again.
Yeah, so going kind of rewinding to start answering your question, last year, sort of summertime, I really felt that I wasn't quite right, and I was and I knew at that point that I wanted to go back to Barkley, and I actively made a decision for lots of reasons. There was some family stuff going on as well with my health, my dad, but that I wasn't going to run the Tour de Gion. I wasn't going to race the Tour de Gion in September, and I actively sort of dropped out of even before starting that race and gave myself some time off not training. I didn't train for like 2 months in the early autumn last September, October last year. And I sort of come November, I really started to feel good again. And it was just amazing. I just felt like the old me again. And so I think kind of moving to the second part of your question, this year, it's hard to compare it directly with previous years, because there's been so much media attention, so much kind of I guess so many calls on my time from interviews and various other things, engagements that which is very exciting and lovely of people to be so interested, but obviously on top of being a mum and having clinical work and research work and all the other things, and that's kind of adds to the I guess load that you have to sort of deal with during the recovery period. So I'd say that this year in terms of recovery, it's definitely been harder, and whether that's just whether that's partly because I'm sure it is partly because I sort of really put myself out there in that fifth loop, especially. I just laid it all out there. I left everything, and you could see from the videos the way I kind of came back to the finish that I didn't have anything left at all to give. And so I think that kind of physically I'm still coming back, recovering from that. I raced this weekend, actually, quite a lot of racing this weekend, and it was good, and I felt quite strong climbing, but I still had a bit of fatigue in the legs. But as I say, the kind of mental recovery and that sort of just needing to sleep a bit more on things, I think that's still I still kind of need a bit more time to get there with that. But I think the difference is in terms of what I've done this year is that I've just, since Barkley, I've not trained, and I'm only planning to start training again in June. So I've just been like just doing my own thing and listening to my body and doing what I wanted to do. So even the race that we did at the weekend, it was just more of a kind of, it was for fun, really, all of it. So yeah, that was kind of a long answer to your question, but hopefully
No,
answered all of it.
that was great. And I'm sure, I mean, you've definitely had no shortage of things to fill your time with while you're not training. And probably just as many things that have been, taking away from your sleep that training normally would be. Since you finished, you have been asked to do so many really cool things, from high profile interviews. You were like a starter at the London Marathon, which is funny because at first I thought, the way the headline read, I was like, Jasmine's running the London Marathon. You probably got that from a few people. And then it was like, no. She's literally like starting the runners. And I was like, okay, that seems much more appropriate to have asked her to do. You delivered the match ball for the Women's Six Nations rugby match. Can you tell us, like, what has been maybe the most unexpected honor? And then maybe what has been your favorite one that you've been able to do?
Oh, that's quite hard. I guess in terms of, I mean, I enjoyed those occasions. Yeah, I loved going to the marathon and being asked to start the marathon, mainly because I enjoyed just being there with the people. I've never actually been to London, the marathon weekend, before. I've watched it on telly. You kind of get some sense of the kind of the atmosphere and the joy that there is there. But I think until you're there in person and you don't really appreciate it fully. So I think for me, the best bit of that weekend, and yeah, certainly that I guess that came about as a result of Barclays, that I got to ask to go there. But the best bit of it for me was just being able to stand at the start line and cheer people through and like clap. I just couldn't stop clapping. I couldn't move away from the fence because everybody that came past us had this just a big grin on their face, and I was grinning and cheering and clapping them through, because there's so much emotion there and so much joy. And it's the same at the finish line. Obviously people are exhausted there, but at the same time, yeah, so much joy. So, and so many people are doing it for charity and to raise, in memory of people. And yeah, so it's an incredible occasion. I think actually I'd quite like to go and run it next year. I think that maybe that's in the pipeline. I've never run a road marathon before, and I probably won't make it a regular occurrence, but I'd quite like to run London. And so that's one of the things, I guess. And then, you know, just to be honest, since then, some of the nicest things have just been some messages from kids, like some messages like letters from school children, for example. I find that incredibly touching. And yeah, those are the things that really make the difference and that mean a lot to you, much more so than kind of any awards, official awards and things like that. So yeah, those are the things that I guess have touched me most.
Are you excited to see, you know, what is to come with Barkley now and women racing there? I think, you know, when we are able to look back historically, when there's these barriers, right? And then they get broken, it's like a can of worms kind of comes in the next few years, right? Because suddenly it helps people's minds, right? Not be stuck in that loop of, is this possible? But now we know it's possible, right? So it kind of resurges this new energy for people to, you know, move to the next barrier, make it faster, right? All those things. You know, are you excited to see like what happens with women? I think there's going to be a big push, and I'm excited because I feel like obviously I've been invested in Barkley as someone who's run there, and then you know, I sometimes get you know, sad, I don't know, discouraged by women, I think, who have been kind of not applying, right? Not putting themselves in there because they didn't know if it was possible, right? And it's just hard to believe. And so, you know, when you reflect on like what is to come with Barkley, have you thought about what you see possible there and what is to come?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head. I think sometimes there's just these glass ceilings, and it's not till someone breaks through them that, you know, that it opens it all out for people. It's not that people couldn't do it before, it's just that in people's minds there's some sort of wall. And I guess I think that's one of the things I tend to go into things with quite an open mind in terms of like my ability to do something. I guess I'm pretty optimistic often that I can do it, and then I just want to prove it. So with, you know, and I've certainly found in the past, for example, with the long distance rounds in the UK, there was a year when I set some new records in those as well. But for example, the Bob Graham round at the time, I think broke the ladies' record by 2 and a bit hours. But it was incredible because actually it moved all the men's attempts. A lot of men attempted it the following year and in the next couple of years. And it was like suddenly the men's record, which had seemed impossible to touch anywhere near for 30 years or something, and suddenly there was this flurry of men attempting the men's record, because it was like the barrier had kind of the kind of finish, the target had sort of been reset totally, and people's expectations of what was possible. So yeah, I absolutely agree that for Barkley I think it'll be the same. I think more women will apply. I think more women will run, and I think that when women actually are there, then they'll just have more believe that it's possible. Like, it will be hard because that's one of the things, but so much of that race is about believing that it's possible and keeping going. So if people, you know, have that in their thoughts the whole time, that it is something that can be achieved, then I think it will make a big difference to how many people actually not only apply and start, but how many people finish.
Yeah, we saw that. That's actually a great example. We saw that really clearly this year as well with the spine race. I think, you know, people with your record there, I think the men especially were like, wait a second, like, let's like go a little harder. Let's race this a little bit differently, right? And go and see what's possible. And then I think it was like by quite several hours, I want to say the spine record dropped this year. And that was really cool to see. And so are you someone, when that happens, you know, with FKTs or with race records like that, where you feel content when you, like, you know, when you make that achievement and you're like, okay, I don't need to go back there because for me that personally is enough? Do you think, like, watching the spine, watching Barkley, you'll get fired to be like, maybe I can go faster? You know, how does that kind of internal dialogue work for you? Is your bucket list just so long, there's so much else you want to get done?
I think probably more the latter. Like, I think I'm pretty good at saying, you know, just recognizing when I've had a run that was, yeah, like one of those runs in a lifetime. Not just about the end result, it's about how the whole experience, isn't it? Like, so it might be a run that you did and it was just like the culmination, everything came together, the company, the weather, it just a fantastic day on the hills. And it's like that with my Bob Graham, and I look back and think, well, what would I want to change? You might be able to go a few minutes faster, but you know, this, you know, the whole experience was there. I don't know if I can kind of better that. I think that I would never say never, because things might change, but in general, I'd say I'm pretty content to move on and just enjoy the feeling of satisfaction, because a lot for me is about the personal satisfaction of having done it as well as I could do it on that day, on that occasion. And if I gave it everything and I was happy with it at that point, then I don't tend to find the kind of the need to go back to it even once the record's broken. I think it's a good thing. Records are there to be broken, and if you spent your whole time keep trying to go back to re-break the record, then you know there'd be so many other things that you'd miss out on. So yeah, I think that's probably in general my view.
And you've mentioned that you are part of the Green Runners, which is a running community passionate about putting the planet first when you're making decisions. You know, you acknowledge that flying every year to Barkley was like a huge, you know, question mark for you. Like you just didn't love the fact that you had to do that. But you know, aligning that with a big dream of finishing this race, right? So can you speak a little bit more about your philosophy when you're balancing these commitments? Because I think this is something everyone struggles with, and hearing your perspective is really valuable for people to know, like it is okay, right? To do some things, and how do you kind of weigh the options when you're looking at things?
Yeah, absolutely. So firstly, I'd say that I travel much less to races than I used to do. I get invitations, especially since Barkley. I've had invitations for races all over the world, paid for, family expenses paid as well. I've said no to them all. And that's just on that basis that I don't want to be traveling all over the world to do races, and I don't feel that it's right. I guess my philosophy on it is trying to, you know, if you've got a list of races, then think about which ones are really important to you. Are there races that you could replace that with that are closer to home that you might be able to travel to by land and sea? So for example, races in Europe I travel to by train, and I've traveled to the World Championships, I traveled to the UTMB, I travel, you know, I'm going to travel to the Tour de Gion by train. So all of those races that I can get to within kind of Europe, I would travel to by train. Then yeah, so traveling less, really deciding which races are important and are irreplaceable. Like Barkley is just unique. There's just no way that you can do it in any other way, is there?
There's no train stop in Wartburg, Tennessee.
there might be kind of challenges that you can do that aren't racing as well. You know, some of the long FKTs, long distance challenges here in the UK, but everywhere else as well, can be like just as satisfying a challenge to take on. And then I think, you know, if you are going to do something, then maybe restrict yourself to one race a year like that. And so if everybody took on that sort of approach to it, then, you know, for the people that are maybe flying 6 times a year, then dropping down to 1 time a year would be a huge difference. So I think the Green Runners, like, we're, as a community, we recognize, like, just by being alive, none of us are perfect. We all have a carbon footprint, but what we can do is try to be better. And so I think I'll just, as I say, taking that kind of approach and thinking about your travel and being more responsible, and then really sort of choosing when you really need to fly, and then kind of making that a special occasion and making the most of it. And with Barkley, for me, I mean, I was, as I say, this year I was pretty determined I was going to get it done, and I was aware as well in the back of my mind that the kind of offset of that would be all the messaging I was able to do afterwards in terms of interviews and things, but also there's, you know, it's not just all about the kind of climate side of it. Obviously, inspirational, being an inspiration, if I managed to pull it off to other women, was a big thing for me as well, and I think that's, you know, that's been equally important in terms of the messaging that I've been able to put across.
Yeah, I think all too often people get very, you know, caught up in the perfection aspect of it. And like you said, there's different ways to look at it and different ways to kind of, you know, make it work within your values and everything. And I think it's really admirable what you've done with that. And I think you're a great role model for that. You were one of the first runners they had that gave up sponsorship of gear, right, to do that. And so, you know, Green Runners really promotes using gear, reusing their gear and finding used gear. What is kind of your go-to? Is there something you're always like finding a way to reuse? Do you have a special place? Like, are you just like, no, I always go and find, you know, my shirts and my kit like used on whatever website or something like that. Like, what's your favorite kind of gear reusable hack?
So I guess currently I'm still just fixing kit that I had. I guess I stopped being sponsored like a couple of years ago. But I'm still just reusing kit and fixing kit. So I mean, today I cycled to work in the t-shirt that I bought for the Transalps in 2013, and that's been really well used since then. So kind of we were laughing at, my husband mentioned the other day, you've had that t-shirt for years and years. But you know, I just sew things up. I'm not very good at sewing, but I just sew things up. For shoes, I guess in terms of kit tips, I think shoes is something that I've started. I didn't used to repair, and now I do. Not only sort of aiming to keep them clean, so cleaning them off after a muddy run, but then also, you know, repairing them. So there's advice on the Green Runners website. There should be advice in this, you know, one of the Green Runners does this things called pair ups, is this kind of company or kind of but they have some instructions on the Green Runners website anyway. There's a link, there should be some links there in terms of describing how to repair your shoes, just with patches. Basically, you can use like kinesio tape and certain type of glue and patch over holes. And if you do that earlier, then it really sort of protects them for longer, and you can keep shoes going for much longer. So I think that's something that I've changed in terms of my approach to kit.
Well, Jasmin, thank you so much. We are going to link in the show notes to the Green Runners website, and it is a community. People can join them, make donations, support that cause. We definitely will push that out and encourage that. I think it's a great cause, and I appreciate all that you've done to help promote that with your time here. Jasmin, I don't know what else to say other than to thank you for everything you have given women in sport in these last few months. I think you're just such a great example of what can happen when, I think that like optimistic belief in yourself is something that everyone can take home and learn from and use in their own life. And I think we all will be watching the video of you finish, watching those photos for years to come when we need some inspiration. And I just can't thank you enough for everything that you've done and taking the time today to chat with me.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's been, a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks again to Jasmin for taking the time to come on the show. And Haley, Feisty has a really fun giveaway for our listeners this week, right?
Yeah, Alyssa, they're giving away a gravel bike, a Live Devote gravel bike. It's in partnership with the Be Good Foundation, which is Rebecca Rush's nonprofit. And I think this is only open to US residents, and you have to enter by June 16th. So it's only a few days away. So you got to get on it. But the address is feistygiveaway.com. And I mean, what a great competition to win a gravel bike. I mean,
you got to play to win. So why not just try and put your name in the hat, see if you can win and get that good bike. That's awesome. Thanks to the Be Good Foundation for partnering with Feisty.
Yeah, feistygiveaway.com by June 16th. And Alyssa, very cool conversation with Jasmin. So glad that you two got to connect. And I am excited to track your team and hear about everything at RAM next time we chat. Good luck to you.
Thanks, Haley. Send us some good vibes out there. I'll talk to you on the other side.
Bye, Alyssa. You've been listening to the IronWomen podcast, hosted by Haley Chura and Alyssa Godesky.
IronWomen is a production of Feisty Media and is edited by Lydia Russell and produced by Ella Natishan.
Head to livefeisty.com to find more podcasts, stories, and fresh perspectives.
Thanks for listening.